Welcome to a place where love isn't simple, where it isn't polished or perfect, but raw, hidden, and unforgettable. Here, you'll step into the fire of forbidden longing, where desire grows stronger the more it's denied. You'll feel the stolen nights, where every breath shared in secrecy becomes both a risk and a salvation. You'll enter the depth beyond the flesh, where passion moves past the body and binds two souls together forever. And you'll carry the weight of silence, that bittersweet ache of keeping love hidden, even when it burns brighter than anything spoken aloud. These are not stories of easy love. They are stories of the love that scars, the love that saves, the love no one else ever knows but lives inside you forever. If you've ever felt a connection too powerful to explain, you found the right place. The fire began quietly, like a spark no one noticed. It wasn't planned, it wasn't expected, and it wasn't something that could be explained to anyone else. It lived in the silence between words, in the way eyes held on a little longer than they should, in the moments when the world around seemed to blur, and only one presence remained clear. At first, it was only longing, hidden deep beneath the surface, buried where no one could see. But the more it was pushed down, the stronger it grew. What was supposed to be controlled became uncontrollable, and what was supposed to be denied became the only thing worth living for. It was forbidden, and that was what made it even more powerful. Every brush of skin, even accidental, carried a weight that ordinary touch could never hold. Every stolen glance across a crowded space felt like a secret only two souls could understand. The restraint was unbearable, yet that very restraint set the body on fire. There was something intoxicating about knowing it should never happen, and yet feeling that it was the only thing that ever truly mattered. Nights were the hardest. When the world went quiet and there was nothing left to distract the mind, thoughts would circle back to the one place they weren't supposed to go. Dreams blurred with reality, and imagination became a dangerous companion. Every memory replayed itself with a sharper edge. Every word spoken earlier in the day carried hidden meanings. Every smile held an entire world of unspoken desire. And when the silence grew too heavy, the longing burned so hot it felt impossible to breathe. Then came the secret moments when resistance gave way to something stronger. It never began with grand gestures. It began with the smallest of risks, a hand held too long, a voice lowered into a whisper, the air so thick with tension it felt like it could shatter with a single word. The first touch wasn't meant to happen, but once it did, there was no turning back. That single moment carried years of silence within it, and once released, the fire could no longer be contained. The secrecy made it sacred. Every encounter was stolen, hidden away from the eyes of the world, and that only made it burn brighter. The walls of ordinary life fell away, and what was left was raw, unfiltered connection. Time seemed to stop in those moments, as if the universe itself conspired to carve out a private world where nothing existed but two hearts colliding in the dark. And in that world, every kiss carried more weight, every embrace was carved into memory, and every breath shared became a promise no words could match. There was fear, of course, fear of being discovered, fear of consequences, fear of the chaos that would follow if the truth escaped. But the fear never outweighed the longing. If anything, it deepened it. The knowledge that it had to remain hidden gave every moment a sharper edge, as if the stakes themselves intensified the passion. The fire didn't weaken under the weight of secrecy. It thrived on it, fed by the forbidden nature of what was shared, and yet it wasn't only about desire. Beneath the fire was something deeper, something unshakable. It was the way silence felt alive in each other's presence, the way one glance could unravel all the carefully built walls, the way the heart seemed to rest only when near. It was not just the body that surrendered, but the soul. Every time the fire burned, it revealed something truer, something purer, something that couldn't be denied. The outside world could never understand because it wasn't for them to understand. To everyone else, it would have looked like a reckless secret, a dangerous path. But to the ones inside it, it was life itself. It was the one thing that made the air feel fuller, the nights worth living, the mornings bearable. Without it, the world would have felt hollow, incomplete, drained of color. With it, even in silence, everything felt alive. The longing never faded, it only deepened. The more it was tasted, the more it was needed, like thirst that could never be quenched. It was not about possession or control. It was about the undeniable pull that drew two souls together despite everything in the world that said they shouldn't. It wasn't about what was right or wrong. It was about what was real. The fire of forbidden longing was both a gift and a curse. It burned brighter than anything else, but it also demanded silence, demanded secrecy, demanded sacrifice. And yet, no matter how heavy the silence, no matter how dangerous the risk, no matter how impossible the circumstances, the truth was simple. The fire couldn't be ignored, and it couldn't be extinguished. It lived in every heartbeat, every breath, every stolen night no one else would ever know about. And sometimes, the most hidden love is the most powerful of all. The nights were never planned. They simply happened, like a secret language the world could never translate. Darkness became a sanctuary, the only place where walls could fall and pretenses could be left behind. The day belonged to duty, to masks, to silence, but the night was different. The night was where the truth lived, where stolen breaths replaced words, and the heart spoke in touches too fragile and too powerful to ever be explained. It began with whispers, soft, cautious, almost afraid, as though even the walls might betray what was being shared. Whispers carried in the dark feel heavier, sharper, truer. They held confessions that would never survive the light of day, and promises that no one else would ever hear. Every word carried weight, pressed close between two souls who already knew that silence in daylight would once again erase everything said. Yet those whispers never left. They clung to memory, echoing long after the voices had gone quiet. Then came the touch, hesitant at first, trembling with the fear of being too much and yet too little. Skin against skin felt different in the dark. It was alive, it was desperate, it was the very definition of salvation. Every caress held the ache of days spent apart. Every kiss tasted like a plea for more time, and every embrace felt like a battle against the dawn. In those moments, the world ceased to exist. Nothing mattered but the warmth of being held, the sound of breaths mingling in silence, the way the heart raced as if it finally remembered why it beat at all. Each encounter was a risk. The fear of being caught lingered at the edge of every kiss. The threat of everything shattering hovered in every stolen hour. But somehow, that risk only deepened the connection. It was as if danger itself sharpened desire, reminding that what was being shared was rare, fragile, and worth everything. The risk made the night burn brighter, the touch sink deeper, the whispers turn into lifelines. And though fear existed, it was always outweighed by the pull that made saying no impossible. What lived in the night couldn't exist in the day, and that made it sacred. In the daylight, distance returned, masks were rebuilt, and silence once again carried the weight of denial. But when night fell, the silence broke. The doors closed, the world faded, and the only thing that remained was the truth that could no longer be hidden. Those hours were short, but they were infinite. Every second carried the depth of a lifetime. Every kiss contained the fire of 1,000 confessions. There was no need for words then, no need for explanations or excuses. The body spoke what the heart had long kept silent. A hand on the face said more than 1,000 declarations. A kiss that lingered long past the point of breath was a vow that no one else would ever hear. Even the pauses, the stillness between touches, the quiet moments when only the sound of breathing filled the space, felt like confessions too deep for language, and in that silence, in that fragile stillness, there was a peace no daylight could ever offer. Yet beneath the sweetness was always the ache, The nights were fleeting, borrowed from a life that didn't allow them. The more they were stolen, the heavier the cost became. Each meeting carried the shadow of parting. Every kiss held the knowledge of goodbye waiting at the edge of dawn. And when that dawn came, when the first hints of light touched the horizon, the world began to steal back what had been borrowed. Hearts broke in silence, not with tears, but with the ache of bodies pulling apart, of voices going quiet again, of walls being rebuilt. Still, the nights kept coming. No matter how heavy the goodbyes, no matter how sharp the ache of silence in the day, the night always returned. And with it returned the salvation found in stolen breaths, the relief of being known, the fire of being touched, the solace of being held in a world that otherwise demanded restraint. Every stolen night was both wound and healing, both curse and blessing, both punishment and reward. It was dangerous, it was fragile, but it was also the only thing that felt true. It wasn't about escape. It wasn't about rebellion. It was about connection so powerful it couldn't be ignored. Every time the night came, it was like coming home to something that had been missing for far too long. It was like remembering who one truly was beneath all the masks, beneath all the silence, beneath all the roles played in daylight. And even though the morning always stole it away, the memory lingered, the touch remained imprinted, and the breath of the other lived on as if it had fused with one's own. The intimacy that unfolded in those hours wasn't measured in how long it lasted, but in how deep it cut. It was never about forever. It was about the undeniable truth of the moment, a truth that said, even if the world never knew, even if the nights remained hidden, even if the silence grew unbearable, what existed in that darkness was real. And sometimes, reality doesn't need the permission of the world to exist. Sometimes, it only needs two souls brave enough to meet in the dark, and a love strong enough to survive in stolen breaths. And those stolen nights, though no one else will ever know them, live forever in the only place that matters. It was never only about the body. The body was where it began, yes, the warmth of skin against skin, the way a kiss could set fire to everything inside, the way a touch could make the air feel heavier than gravity itself. But what grew out of those moments was something far beyond flesh. Every caress carried meaning that couldn't be spoken aloud. Every kiss became a language of its own, and every embrace said more than any vow could hold. It wasn't just desire pulling two bodies together. It was something deeper, something that lived inside the soul and refused to let go. There was a silence between touches that felt louder than words, a silence that hummed with recognition, the kind that told two people they had always known each other, even if the world said they hadn't. Eyes met in the dark, and it wasn't lust that lingered there. It was devotion, a kind of surrender that had nothing to do with weakness and everything to do with trust. To be touched was not simply to be wanted. It was to be seen, to be known in a way no one else had ever dared to know. The body was the doorway, but the soul was the destination. What happened in those nights could not be reduced to passion alone. Passion was fire, and fire burned bright but fast. This was something deeper, slower, stronger. This was not fire that consumed. It was light that revealed. Every kiss revealed the heart. Every embrace revealed the longing. Every whispered breath revealed the truth that had been hiding in silence for too long. It was a love that lived not in grand declarations, but in small, intimate moments. The way hands intertwined, fingers locked as if refusing to let the other drift away. The way breath mingled, shallow and urgent, before calming into something steady, as if two bodies remembered how to breathe only when pressed together. The way silence filled the room, yet never felt empty, because in that silence, hearts were speaking in a language older than words. Each caress was a promise that even if the world turned hostile, even if silence returned with the morning, the bond would remain unbroken. Touch was no longer just physical. It became a covenant, written not with ink but with warmth, sealed not by words, but by the steady rhythm of a heartbeat pressed against another. And in those moments, there was no fear, no doubt, no question. There was only the certainty that what existed was real, and that it was eternal. Desire came and went like waves, but what tied them together was deeper than longing. It was the way the soul reached for another soul, even before the body did. It was the way one glance could undo every defense, the way one smile could shatter years of silence, the way one touch could strip away the weight of an entire life lived in restraint. The soul knew before the body acted. The soul had always known. Even when apart, the connection remained. It lived in the memory of touches, in the echo of voices, in the quiet spaces where thoughts wandered back to moments that could never be forgotten. It was as if some invisible thread bound two hearts together, stretched across time and distance, unbreakable and unseen, yet felt with every beat. The body might crave presence, but the soul carried presence always. That was the depth beyond the flesh, the truth that love did not end when the night did, that connection did not fade with distance, that passion was only a surface to something infinite beneath. There were times when the weight of the world pressed in, when silence seemed unbearable, when distance felt like it might tear everything apart. But then came a touch, a kiss, a single moment in the dark, and suddenly the world was gone again. Suddenly everything made sense again, and in that moment it became clear that the bond was not fragile at all. It was unshakable because it did not live in the body alone. It lived where no one could reach it, where no one could break it, in the soul. The intimacy was raw, yes, but it was also pure. It was not about taking, it was about giving, not about possession, but about surrender. Every time hands found each other, every time lips met, it was not to claim, but to release all the silence, all the ache, all the longing, all the love that had no other place to go. And in that release, there was freedom. Freedom from the world, freedom from masks, freedom from every expectation, but the one truth that mattered. The body was temporary, fragile, fleeting, but the soul, what lived in the soul, was endless. And that was what the nights revealed. That was what every kiss whispered. That was what every embrace carved into memory. That what was shared was not of the flesh alone, but of something deeper, something eternal. And when the night ended, when silence returned, when distance crept back in, nothing could erase it. The body might ache with absence, but the soul remained full, because once two hearts speak that unspoken language, they never forget it. They carry it with them, always, in every breath, in every thought, in every quiet moment when the world falls still. That is the depth beyond the flesh. That is the love that binds forever. There is a silence that feels heavier than words, a silence that presses into the chest until it becomes almost unbearable. It is the silence of keeping something sacred hidden from the world, of carrying a love so powerful it cannot be spoken aloud, because to speak it would be to shatter everything. That silence is both prison and sanctuary, both torment and protection, and within it, the heart learns how to ache and how to soar at the same time. Every moment spent together was lived twice, once in the truth of it, and again in the silence that followed. The truth was alive, fierce, undeniable. It was in the way eyes met and held longer than they should, in the way hands found each other in the dark, in the way hearts beat wildly as if they were trying to etch the memory into eternity. But then came the silence when the world demanded separation, demanded distance, demanded denial. And so the heart carried two lives at once, one full of fire, the other full of quiet ache. The secrecy was painful, but it was also what made the connection burn so deeply. Knowing that no one else could know made every moment feel like stolen treasure, too rare to share, too fragile to expose. Every kiss carried the weight of that secrecy. Every embrace was filled with the knowledge that once the night ended, everything would be erased by morning. And yet, That knowledge only deepened the hunger, only sharpened the sweetness of each moment. It was as if the risk itself poured gasoline onto the flame, and silence became the cost willingly paid for the ecstasy of connection. There were times when the silence felt unbearable, times when it ached to speak the truth out loud, to hold hands in the light of day, to simply exist without the shadow of hiding, times when it felt cruel to smile at a distance, pretending there was nothing deeper burning beneath the surface. And yet, beneath that ache was always the memory of the nights when silence broke, when the world was locked outside and nothing existed but the truth of two hearts colliding. Those memories were enough to keep the silence bearable, enough to remind that what was hidden was not gone. It was alive, waiting, breathing, burning in secret. The paradox of it all was that the silence both hurt and healed. It hurt because it demanded denial, because it forced separation in the hours when togetherness felt impossible. But it healed because it made every moment of connection sacred. Nothing was wasted, nothing was casual. Every second together was lived with intensity, with reverence, with the awareness that it might be the last for a long time. That urgency made every touch more tender, every kiss more desperate, every embrace more unforgettable. The silence carved pain, but it also carved depth. There were countless moments when the urge to confess everything grew overwhelming, to say the words out loud, to let the world know, to refuse the burden of secrecy. But deep down, it was known that this love was not meant for the world. It was meant only for the two who lived it, and perhaps that was what made it so powerful, because in the silence there were no outside voices, no judgments, no interference. There was only truth, untainted by anyone else's opinion, existing purely between two souls who had found each other in a world that should have kept them apart. The weight of silence could be cruel. There were days when it felt suffocating, when the absence of words became almost unbearable, when the ache of pretending there was nothing burned hotter than the fire itself. But there was also sweetness in that weight. Sweetness in knowing that what was hidden was theirs alone. Sweetness in carrying a secret too precious to ever risk. Sweetness in the quiet knowledge that even if the world never knew, the love was real. And perhaps that was the greatest truth of all. Love doesn't need witnesses. It doesn't need approval or recognition. It doesn't need to be spoken out loud to exist. It only needs to be felt, deeply, wholly, without apology. And in the silence, it was felt more deeply than anything ever spoken in daylight. In the silence, it grew stronger, purer, more eternal. There is an ache to living this way, yes, an ache that never fully leaves. But there is also a beauty in it, a beauty in knowing that some loves are too deep for the world, too sacred for light, too powerful to ever be reduced to words. Some loves can only exist in silence. And that silence, as heavy as it may be, carries within it the truest form of connection the heart will ever know. If these stories touched you, if you felt the fire, the stolen breaths, the depth beyond the flesh, and the silence that love forces us to carry, then stay with me. There are more truths to uncover, more nights to remember, more hearts to bear. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss the next chapter of a love too deep to silence. Until then, carry these words with you and let them remind you that the deepest loves are often the ones no one else ever sees.